Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review Podcast and to our listeners all across America and around the world. Now, on occasion, public relations firms are contracted to help an organization create a campaign to help promote their interest or to help terminate activities they deem detrimental to their interests. Constructing a successful campaign is work for seasoned professionals with actual campaign experience. Now, because you may have helped get certain activities approved for your college campus, does not fit into that category. My guest today works with clients whose business takes place in the public square, and they desire to do so in a strategic way that mitigates risk and builds goodwill. She honed her skills with hands-on experience in public affairs and advocacy work, from pivotal roles in campaigns to preserve oil tax reform to serving as spokesperson for statewide organizations and elected officials. Her experience and reputation in Alaska is well established. Now, before establishing Blueprint Alaska Public Relations, she worked at Alaska Oil and Gas Association and was also named the Alaska PRSA Chapter Communicator of the Year in 2017, and she's also accredited in public relations. So joining me today from Anchorage, Alaska, I certainly welcome Sarah Erkmann Ward to the program. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here talking with you today and to your listeners.
Oh, good. So look, let's start off by telling us how you wind up getting involved in campaigns or producing campaigns and being involved in them. How did that all come about for you?
Well, like anything, it was a circuitous route. For me, who loves to think strategically, it was not strategic. It was one of those things that just kind of ended up happening. But I had been involved in public relations for years and had focused really on kind of the core principles of media relations and publicity and reputation management and all that. But I found myself increasingly having something to say about the current political climate in our state and wanted to have more of a voice in that. And so I started writing for a now defunct political blog here in Alaska and got the attention of the mayor-elect for Anchorage at the time. This is more than, this was like a dozen at least years ago, and was asked to serve as his communications director. So I jumped on that opportunity, and boy, were my eyes open to public affairs, and I really came to appreciate it as a discipline, and boy, I was hooked. And from there, my career led on to advocating for the Alaska Oil and Gas Association, which is the trade organization for the oil industry in Alaska, which is a huge deal here in the state. We are a resource state, and we tend to have lots of issues to talk about because we are always, as I say, on the menu up here. So was thrown into the waters of ballot measure campaigns and lobbying in our state capitol and all those things. And even though there were some nights where I, probably cried myself to sleep, I would never want to do anything else again because I have gotten totally addicted to not just the fun of working on a campaign with like-minded people, but learning some really key strategies about how to communicate well with people, and those lessons have been incredible.
I'm glad to hear you bring that up. As we mentioned before I pushed the button here, was that I've also been involved in campaigns both at the presidential level and congressional level and the mayoral level. And if I could say one thing, so it actually is more than one, but one thing I really, really learned out of being in politics and campaigning is details, attention to details.
Yes.
Because there's so many things that could possibly go wrong or get left out or handled or mismanaged or something along those ways that can really cause a huge, huge problem. So I think attention to detail is hugely important to be involved in campaigns.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a old saying, but the devil is in the details. Absolutely applies to campaigns. You don't have to look very long to find an example of a campaign where somebody made seemingly a minor misstep, and then 2 weeks later the campaign is over.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why it's so important to have the right team when you're putting a campaign team together, because you need everybody aligned on. I have a colleague who's managed campaigns, and I've worked with him as well, and his famous line is "no unforced errors."
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have enough challenges thrown at us. We have enough problems to deal with. Let's not create our own. And that is all about details.
So let's talk about how you go about constructing a campaign, how you begin about building one. What are some of the first things that you need to get your hands on or have information about? Take it from your point of view. What do you need to get started on a campaign?
Well, ultimately, first you have to build that team and make sure that everybody's on the same page and has the same idea about where the campaign is headed, because you will quickly find out that if people are not aligned, you've got some real problems, and that will manifest itself in a poorly planned and poorly executed campaign. But assuming you get the right team together and everybody's working simpatico on things, I'd say that for larger scale campaigns, this is not always possible on lower level, like municipal races, but assuming you're going gangbusters in a state or a ballot measure, you have got to do the research on the front end. And that sounds overly simplistic because, of course, you need research, but it can be tempting to jump in with tactics when the climate is urgent, or you just feel so passionately about the issue that you just know that this message is gonna resonate and this message is gonna land. And then you do the research, and I've seen this firsthand, where a bunch of really smart people in a room around a conference table said, "Yep, we bet any money this is going to be our winning message." And then we went and tested it, and it fell flat.
Mm-hmm.
And the messages that we didn't expect to perform as well, in fact, did perform better than we expected. Or in the verbatim comments on some of these public opinion surveys, we gleaned nuggets of information that we didn't even think about. People were voluntarily telling us, like, well, here's what I think, and here's what would perhaps cause me to change my mind. And so we were able to pull that out. So you've got to do the work on the front end, assuming you have budget to do it, really nail down what your messaging is, because once it's out in the public square, and you can find out the hard way that you've completely misread public or voter sentiment, and then you'll find out on election day that it didn't work.
Let me back up a second, because you did mention research, and that is, you're absolutely right about research, but I also want to mention that you need to research both sides of the issue, because you need to be able to explain or deflate or diffuse what some of their arguments are with data, so forth and so on, and fully understand everything that you're talking about. So that research makes sure I understand what it is we've got going in here and what they've got going and what they don't have going, so that we can be, reasonably intelligent in our responses.
You've nailed it, and I can tell you have done this before, because that's one of the main things we do, is we not only test our messages but theirs. So by the time we get to, usually in my case, a ballot measure situation, we've been hearing the opposition's message for a while. That's why we're forming a campaign. And for example, in one ballot measure within the last couple of years, we were again certain that the opposition's main message was really compelling. And it hit us right in the gut, and we were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to say, and how are we going to react to this? We go out and test it and find out that the voters thought it was it was too glib, and they didn't buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we were like, heck, let's get them to say that as much as possible.
Right.
Let's egg them on to keep repeating that line, because we know it doesn't work. So again, the beauty of, and these were big research budgets. I'm not going to tell any organization on the planet that this is an easy thing to do, but if you could do it and you can make the investment, it makes campaigning so much easier.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I learned for having worked for politicians, and because having been the press secretary and writing a lot of stuff, is I tell people that politicians tell you what they want you to know. I don't care what the bill might be or legislation might be. There's a lot more to it that perhaps you don't know. So when you're in a community meeting, or somebody's trying to press you with what the information they have, perhaps one of the things somebody might need to ask is, what are you not telling us?
Right.
Get prepared for that, because there's too much in whatever the campaign is. There's a lot going on, and everything is always not put on the table. So the listeners, if you will, or those in the audience, need to be prepared to respond to a question like that as well.
Right, and that's the sins of omission.
Mm-hmm.
It's just human nature to make your case, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody gets to explain their perspective or their point of view, but I mean, as communicators, we are also ethically bound to present the full story, right? No, we can't be cute or play hide the ball. You have to have an informed discussion or debate on the topic, and so that's an excellent question to ask anybody who's presenting and advocating for one side. Is like, well, okay, that's your point of view. Tell me what your opposition would say. What's their argument on this issue? And a lot of times, most of the either elected officials or community leaders or policymakers I've dealt with will embrace that opportunity to say, well, thank you for asking. In fact, my opposition would say X, but here's why we think Y makes more sense. And then you just have more of an informed debate, which in today's day and age, like, what a quaint concept, but but we can all do better we can all be better citizens in that way too, and ask people to give us the whole story.
Mm-hmm. What would you think might have been one of your biggest challenges in a campaign that you've had to overcome or deal with?
I would say for some of the scale of the races I've worked on, not just statewide ballot measures, but gubernatorial races, and to a lesser extent U.S. Senate races, just the complete holistic, how much it takes up your entire being, if you will. It can just suck all the life out of you, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you really, to be part of a successful campaign team, there are no days off. Forget about taking a vacation a month before the election. I mean, you got to live, eat, and breathe this stuff, and you can always take a break a few days after election day.
Mm-hmm.
That was always our thing. Was like after the vote was certified, everybody was checked out for 2 weeks. But you just have to be prepared for that and know that it comes with the territory. It's part of the job. And if that's not appealing, if you don't live and breathe hashtags and what's trending on Twitter and the bombshell editorials, then this probably isn't something you want to get involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can certainly tip my hat to that one, having worked 7 days a week.
Right.
And eat a lot of Chinese food, donuts, and pizza along the way.
Right. And anxiety, just an aside of sadness to go along with it. Mm-hmm. Right. It's just an all-consuming thing. But if you love it, it's never more fun.
You know, the other thing that I think is important too is that not only your team, but everybody on the team needs to be on the same page, because sometimes, even though they're on your team, some folks can make mistakes that can cause problems. I recall having worked I was in Delaware on a campaign, and being a small state, there were only two of us up there, but someone from Washington, D.C. called directly to the mayor, brought up an issue that we weren't familiar with. We bumped into the mayor the same day, and he's jumping up and down asking us what's going on. Well, I don't know, because I'm hearing this for the first time. So,
right.
There's got to be protocols put in place so that, the campaign team knows right at the beginning of the day or whenever, or the first to know what's going on, so they're not caught in any sort of a tight squeeze that causes some problems.
Absolutely. No surprises, no unforced errors.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes down to everybody on the team marching in the same direction. And something that you can't account for everything. There's always going to be surprises that catch somebody off guard. There's just no way to prevent that, obviously. But to the extent possible, it's about communication. As things as granular as, okay, well, maybe we need briefing papers before each of these events so we don't get caught by surprise again. And then just people who can work together and trust each other. Trust is also a huge issue, as you well know, on a campaign team. You have to feel like everything you say and do is held in confidence among the team, or if once suspicion or feelings of mistrust start to breed on a campaign team, then it just all falls apart.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you've liked best about having been on a campaign?
I like to, so my parents would say when they raised me, that I was a busybody and liked to get into other people's business. So I love knowing what's really going on. kind of that insider view of reading the news and seeing all the public debate, and your mind, you're like, I know exactly what's going on here. That very few other people know. So it's just that view of the insider's look at like what's really happening, and that once you've been in that space, it's hard to give it up. Once you're a source of information, and people come to you and say, "Hey, I know you know what's happening right now. Can you explain it to me, or can you tell me what's really going on?" It sounds like probably kind of self-centered or egotistical, but I really have just enjoyed it in terms of having access to information that isn't ordinarily available. It just is really fun.
Mm-hmm. In terms of preparation for the candidates, how did you go about doing that? Because you know where he or her is going to be speaking, who the audience is. How do you prepare them in advance to make sure that everything goes as smooth as possible?
Well, that's a great question, because that's a hugely important in a campaign, obviously, and that is something that can be done as far ahead of time as possible, or maybe a few minutes before. But this is a classic public relations approach, right? You just need to do the research as much as you can. If you're speaking to the dental society, well, you better get boned up on what's going on in the land of dentistry, and what do dentists care about, especially if it's in the political space. And then more tactically to prepare, of course, practicing. I mean, I know it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but politicians have just got to get used to it, or any kind of spokesperson for any kind of organization that's involved in any kind of public affairs effort. You better get used to talking out loud, as I had a client used to say, and practice. And not only practice your talking points, but as you alluded to earlier, get the opposition's talking points and practice responding to those. So not just parroting your top three things, but okay, worst case scenario, you get asked this question. How are you going to respond to it? And then practice out loud in front of people, not in your head, not write it out, say it, because you are going to be on a stage with a podium and a microphone, and writing it out is not an option. So say it out loud, and let's talk about your tone, how your face looks. Do you look angry? Do you look smug? All those things that can sink a campaign. And I think one of the classic ones is the Nixon-Kennedy debate way back when poor Richard Nixon's face he had worn awful makeup, and he was sweating and melting off, and those nonverbal things that just cause people to form opinions, and good, bad, or indifferent, it's reality. So really honing in on those things. Like, hey, I noticed when you say this, you tend to have a little smirk, and that's got to go. So be prepared.
One of the things that perhaps any organization finds difficult is trying to persuade people that we're going to have to raise taxes on this particular piece. And most folks jump up and down and complain about that, but taxes serve a purpose. If this is what you want, this is how we're going to pay for it. Have you had the experience of trying to sell people the idea that this taxes, if you want this is the taxes you're going to have to pay to get it? Have you had that experience before?
No, not specific. I've talked more about taxes and business taxes than I ever thought in a million years I would talk about in my profession. But usually I've been on the other side of the fence, explaining why what would be considered, for example, this last campaign I went through, the proposed tax increase on the industry I was working for was like it was like 150% increase overnight. And so we were in the position of explaining why it may sound like an easy solution to just raise the industry's taxes, but that's a real number with real impacts, and here's how that will impact you, Susie Cream Cheese voter. There will be fewer job opportunities, and we will have less money circulating in our economy, which means we will lose people to the lower 48. That's what we call you guys down there. And so,
and it's warmer sometimes too.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I've actually been in the position of explaining taxes is difficult. No matter what side you're on, whether it's increase or keep them steady or decrease them, it's a arcane subject for most people. And so I think what everybody can agree on is you have to humanize it in a way. It's not just a number on a balance sheet. It has an impact on you, your family, and what does that look like? And what are the impacts? And why should you care? Yeah, that's the age-old public relations question. Who cares? Why should I care? And if you can answer that question, you're going to be in a better position to get people to take your side.
Well, one of the things that I learned while I was on our team to get the public to buy into the fact that we needed to build a brand new convention center here.
Right.
Round numbers, that was $600 million, and obviously it's got to be paid for some sort of way. What happened here in Nashville was that they raised taxes on hotel rooms, on rental cars. They created a district downtown where most visitors come, that the restaurants had to pay some extra taxes that way. So now that we have to tell our constituents, don't worry about your property taxes, they're not going up because here's where the money's coming from. So I think the issue can be how are the taxes going to be raised? Who actually has to pay for them? And you're right, it's a tricky situation sometimes because once people heard no property tax increase and, we're losing money by not having it, I think one of the big issues was Nashville was somewhere like 25th or 30th on the list of where people want to go to have a convention. I think we were compared with Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota, somewhere like that. And people couldn't imagine that. But once we explained to them how it's going to be financed, everybody settled down and sort of began to buy into the situation. Their taxi cabs, rental cars, all of them had extra taxes, so they weren't coming out of your pocket. So I agree with you that taxes is a difficult, tricky situation, but part of the issue is understanding the entirety of it, and somewhere along the line, somebody's going to benefit from it and somebody's perhaps not going to.
Right. Well, and what a success story for Nashville. I mean, obviously that's worked out in your favor because, I think the most recent stats I saw, you guys are like neck and neck with Las Vegas for one of the best places to have a convention.
Oh, my heavens. Hotels start popping up here like crabgrass. Seriously, like weeds. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Virgin, Ritz-Carlton, all of them have hotels down here. A lot of them have the big restaurants up on the roof, bars on the roof, everything. Nashville is on fire down here. There's absolutely no question about that. And hotels are still going up. We probably have put up 20 hotels down in the last 2 years.
Well, and I've visited Nashville many times over the last few years, and I've seen it. I'm like, is there a crane that's not in use in the city? What a rewarding thing for you to work on. You can see the results of your work, and boy, in PR we struggle sometimes to show measurement. Well, you can measure it in cranes.
Mm-hmm. Well, they actually
and hotel books.
They actually call that the city bird now. The cranes in the sky.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So any other important things that if somebody's going to work on a campaign or has been working on a campaign that you think that they should be aware of or think about as they move forward?
Yes, I would say one of the most important things you can do before you really get going, when you're in the initial stages of planning and putting a campaign together, is find out who your friends are. And if you find yourself lacking in friends, you need to go get some friends. And that sounds glib, but truly, a campaign ideally is run by a diverse, broad coalition of people, of organizations, of companies. And so it would behoove anyone, even if you're not involved in the campaign, I call it like a relationship audit. Do that with your organization or your company or your client now. If you were caught in the crosshairs for something right now, who would raise their hand voluntarily and speak up and say, I support person X or company X? Mm-hmm. Find out who those people are. If that list is short, or you can immediately identify gaps, like, well, you know what? I don't have anybody from organized labor on here. Maybe it's time for us to reach out and start building relationships with organized labor, or whatever the gaps you identify. Do that first. Because once you get into campaign mode, any overtures to those groups, organizations, or people can come across as self-serving. Like, oh, okay, well, now you're on the ballot, so now you want to be friends. Mm-hmm. Gee, thanks. So not only is it the right thing to do just to be a responsible, good community member, but it's tactically and strategically smart to know who is likely to join you, or not even likely to join you. Ask them, will you support us before you launch, so that when you launch, it's this big, intimidating group of people and organizations that your opposition will say, oh my God, how are we going to? push back on this group.
Right, particularly at the press conference when you make that announcement, that's when you want all the heavy hitters standing there beside you so people can begin to see that.
Right. And just that is it's a very bold statement and a signal that we are serious, we are well equipped, and we have the right people behind us to win this thing. And hopefully your opposition takes notice. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, they'll just fold their tent and say, never mind, we misread the environment.
Well, Sarah, this has really been a very informative discussion we've had, and I'm certainly our listeners will benefit from this. So, are you ready to impart some additional wisdom before we come to a close?
Just that, be a smart citizen. In today's day and age, campaigns are struggling with the same issues that all public relations practitioners are, which is disinformation, misinformation, people selectively choosing where they get their news from. Campaigns will be better from the municipal level all the way to the presidential level if we as leaders advocate for an honest discussion about what the issues are. And I think it's incumbent upon us to lead in that space to make, not only ethically, but just in the interest of our clients and our organizations, that we talk about facts and we do it in a civil and productive way. That may sound like a fool's errand in today's day and age, but we've got to start somewhere, and I would just encourage everyone to figure out how you can help. How can you contribute to a more civil discourse in your community or in this country, because we need to get back on track.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly agree with you. I give you a hearty hello and Hail Mary, that sort of thing. But my guest today has been Sarah Erkmann Ward. Sarah, thank you so very, very much for being on the Public Relations Review podcast. We've enjoyed it. I'm sure our listeners will get a lot from it as well. Sarah is the president of Blueprint Alaska Public Relations in Anchorage, Alaska. I want to thank her again. I also want to thank our listeners and continue to listen to the Public Relations Review podcast. And if you've enjoyed the show, we look forward to having a great review from you as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.